We're going to start with a session looking at climate migration across the rural urban continuum. And I'm happy to welcome Benoy Peter, Executive Director at CMID, who works on migration, labor, and inclusion. Libby Johnson, Executive Director of Vikas, focused on rural livelihoods and community development. And Sheetal Patil, researcher at IIHS, whose work focuses on rural livelihoods, mobility, and agriculture systems. Over to you, Sheetal.
Welcome to day two of the workshop. We have heard a lot of numbers and data and so many models and things yesterday. We are changing gears today and going to the storytelling and looking at what narratives we can bring and what are the possibilities from the ground, right? So we start with focusing this session on how climate risks are experienced differently in these two locations of rural and urban, because we know that migration, whether it is climate migration or any other migration, has two ends, which is source and destination. And understanding this climate across the migration across this spectrum is important. And the risks and responses, what people do to those risks, are also important and very important to cover in the media also, right? So climate change is not just a story of disaster, right? It's uh, quite different. It is also quietly kind of altering how people live, how people work, how people move, and what decisions they do, right? For some it is a force for migration, but for some it is actually a really kind of a complicated decision to stay or not to move. Uh, Researchers have, you know, debated that whether migration is a result of climate crisis or is it adaptation to climate change. But what matters is people are exercising their agency. They are actually making decisions based on different kind of circumstances and situations they go through, right? And as a communicators or as storytellers, our role is to make these nuances visible, because these nuances are not coming into numbers, these nuances are not coming in models. So telling this story of both source and destination, uh, or movers or moving or staying, or vulnerability or adaptation, those things are important. So mobility has two ends, as I said, and it's a spectrum. So what is coming out and what I'm coming to is that there is a agency where people talk about decisions and take the mobility decisions, and it ranges from involuntary immobility to forced migration and everything in between this, like voluntary or involuntary migration, non-migration, and all that. What does literature say? I'm not going to go through all these things here, but the literature says that there are so many different terms that the immobile people or not moving people are referred to as. They are referred to as trapped population, left behind population, and all these labels can strip the people of their agency, right? We know that. And sometimes people stay because they want to stay, and other times because they can't move. We need to carefully also find words to refer to them, and what kind of a agency we are giving to them by referring to that word. And that is why stayers and non-movers, those kind of words seem to be respectful, seem to be accurate than calling them as stagnant or immobile. And immobility, so what appears is that we need to reconceptualize immobility. I'm talking about immobility, but I'll also come to migrants and migration. So agency as an important determinant is what we are here seeing in the literature, or also when we talk to people. Thus, we need to shift the language from traditional immobility or non-migrants or trapped kind of a population to emerging kind of a resilient stayers or local adapters, because they are also kind of making their lives do and livelihoods make for them in the source area. So we are referring to them, or we should refer to them as stayers or staying, or that kind of a connotation. There are some risks, and we have worked in Odisha as a source area, and we have also worked in North Karnataka as another source area in the project. And we have looked at what all climate risks they are facing through, and what it actually impacts on their livelihood. So precarious living conditions, or parched land because of the delayed rainfall in North Karnataka, or the livelihood impact on turmeric because the rain has not stopped, or there is untimely rain, so the drying of turmeric has been kind of affected. So these are the risks and those are the impacts of those. So when we talk about kind of a staying in the context of migration, because staying is also not in isolation. In same family, people are moving and going into different places. So what we have in the context of migration, what staying means is that uh, remittances are not just money, but there are also social remittances, and also they enable improvement in living and livelihoods in the source areas. It improves the education status, and also sometimes it improves the adaptive capacity of the people who are staying back. So this is the corridor that Chani was also talking yesterday about, and from North Karnataka to Bangalore and from Odisha to uh, Kochi. And these are some, like very initial kind of a things that we have found from our scoping visits. Our data is still coming from the household surveys, which will nuance this even further. But sometimes what we want to just say that who stays, why they stay, what are the drivers that they stay in, and what are the climate change risks that they face, and what are the adaptation potentials are there. And then we come to the destination site, and that is where Bangalore and Kochi as a maybe Ernakulam as a district appears. And there we also have profile of what migrant people are there in these destinations. Uh, and when they come to destinations or the cities, it's not that the risks what they were facing in source areas have kind of vanished, or the hazards are not there in the cities. uh, there are precarities also in destinations. Migrant workers, we see that they are not having equal access or good access to all the services like even water, sanitation, and all that. They have to kind of share and pool money and resources to access these resources, access these kind of basic kind of facilities that they have to they need on a day-to-day basis. There's also exposure to heat, and I think yesterday also Aisha told a lot about how migrant also are facing these kind of things in destinations. Floods, we are commonly experiencing all these things, not only in monsoon, but many other parts of the year, that urban flooding, and mostly where the migrant population is concentrated, there it is even more severe. But everything is not really so gloomy. There are also positives, and that is where I think also we have to kind of focus on. Um, there are, as I said, remittances which are helping people to improve their conditions of living and education and many other things. People are also going into alternative livelihoods, diversifying their earning sources, and also adapting in agriculture to make it better for their uh, living in the source areas. Uh, but then that is where the story is, and that is where we have to kind of see where the climate migration along rural urban continuum and why we need to understand that. Both in source and destination, there are precarities, and there are also vulnerabilities which are mounting for livelihoods in both the areas. And there are also intersectionalities which make this more severe, or sometimes discriminate also from the upward movement. So we need to examine these challenges and outcome across this spatial, which is source and destination, and the process of migration and staying. And that is where we come to this panel, and I'm very happy that we have Libby and Benoy with us. Uh, and just wanted to introduce them a little more in detail because Sophie just told their names. Libby Johnson, who is currently an executive director of Gram Vikas in Odisha. Over nearly 30 years, he has been leading the transformative initiatives in water, livelihood, migration, local governance, and disaster resilience. He contributes to program design and strategy across civil society and government systems at state and national levels. Welcome, Libby, and thank you for being here. Benoy, uh, who is one of the co-founders and the executive director of the Center for Migration and Inclusive Development. He has over 25 years of diverse experience, both as academic and as practitioner. In India, he is one of the key influencers who advocates migration as a solution rather than a problem. He has a PhD in population studies and has contributed to programs that promote inclusion of marginalized population across South Asia. Welcome, Vinod. So I think what I'm going to do now is just going to give mics to both of them and ask them to maybe tell the stories from the, uh, I won't say ground, but from the field, and take us through this journey of from source to destination, and maybe like, how the migrants experience this journey. Who wants to start? Okay.
New generation, we are supposed to let the younger people go first. Um, thank you. Thank you, Sheetal. And it's good to see you all. The presentation that Sheetal made actually summarizes what actually migration is. Because after 2020, the way public in India has come to understand migration, um, there is this very strong sense of despair and desperation, because of the images that we get is, Kavita and I were talking just a while back about, and I asked her to stop after a while because I said I can't have my morning filled with only the recollection of those images. So there is that reality, and for us in Odisha, this is at least 30 years old. There is a railway station called Kandabanji, which many of you will know, where whole families, in 1997, when I first went to that part of Odisha, come end of November, trains going to Vishakhapatnam or to Raipur, full. Some of them going through intermediaries, labor contractors, but many of them actually just going out of hope. They will go to Raipur, live on the street. The husband will find a job as a rickshaw puller or something. The lady would find some work in some site. Children will play around. We've seen these sites in construction. I mean, these sites in construction locations in cities, children hanging around and all that. But what happens in Raipur in the informal sector has been reality in Odisha for many years. So what came out in the public domain in 2020 is actually deja vu. It's like, itna badi baat kya hai? Because we've seen that. And that's the reality of migration, or that is presumed to be the reality of migration in Odisha. We now have a task force headed by the Deputy Chief Minister of the state that's been asking people to develop strategies to stop migration. And it's a very, very genuine need for one part of Odisha, from where the Kandabanji model, I refer to migration of Odisha in 5 railway stations. The Rourkela migration is where slightly educated women started going to north of India to work as domestic workers. And these were largely the Oraon tribes who had converted to Christianity many, many decades ago. Some education, some healthcare, and then better jobs in cities. So you will find in Delhi a lot of domestic workers from Jharkhand. Actually, that started with Rourkela railway station. The second is what we call Chhatrapur in Ganjam. Estimated 7 lakh people from Odisha working in Surat. And Ganjam, Chhatrapur and Berambur railway stations are where they go from. But the oldest migration in I think in the history of India is the Cuttack migration. You go to large, rich households in Kolkata, all the cooks are still from the undivided Cuttack district in Odisha. You talk about plumbers and electricians in Bombay and Delhi being Odia, but cooks were the first. And a substantial contribution to Odisha's growth in coastal Odisha is considered to be politically, economically very advanced, is contribution of these migrants. They are the ones who went out, earn money, and these were all farming dependent households. And in 1971, a cyclone had battered that place. And finally, the Kantamanji, which I already referred, and finally the one that's what I think is most relevant to us today is what we call the Muniguda Raigada migration, which is, in our estimates, 93% men in the age group of Aadhaar age group of 18 and above, real age group maybe 16 and above, actually migrating because they want to migrate. Many of them, if you ask them in a political forum, why are you migrating? They'll say, we have no other option. But you go to Kerala and ask them, why are you in Kerala? Because, oh, we like to be here. So forget the narrative dynamics there of how they choose to explain their story. And this is the migration that is today contributing to economic growth in Odisha. Benoy and I, we have done Vikas and CMID, and the reports are there for you to refer. We are at the most conservative level estimating 200 crores coming to some blocks in Odisha every year. And if you look at what is money coming from outside to those blocks, primarily through government, is in the range of 30 to 40 crores. NREGS, pensions, and the entire range, if you calculate in a block in Odisha, which is around 80,000 to 1 lakh population, the government is typically spending 30 to 40 crores. Migrant workers are bringing in new money. Government money is not necessarily new. A lot of it is recycled locally. It's the state taxes that's coming back. Migrants are bringing in money from Kerala, Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, and Goa to the tune of, depending on the location, anywhere from 30 crores to 200 crores in the 6 blocks that we have studied. Now, that is growth. Imagine, those of you who know economics, know the concept of money multiplier. It basically says the more you recirculate money, the value of money goes down, which means fresh money that comes into a block is actually, in a period of 10 years, 200 crores today will create value worth 800 crores. A multiplier of 4 is very, very straightforward. Now, that is the force. That is the case for migration as adaptation, migration as a choice, migration aspiration, migration opportunity that I want.
I will just one follow-up thing. I wanted to also ask Libby about, you talked about migration, but little bit about people who are not migrating, and maybe you said 93% are male. Then there is another part to that family, which is female, elderly, whoever, children, and you said Aadhaar age of 18 and above. So could you just talk a little bit about people staying back, and how does this relationship between the migrant and the migration and the remittance and the staying?
We'll come to the difficult parts of the conversation. Like when I speak to donors to raise grants, the first 5 minutes are all good stories. And then once we start talking about the project specifically, it's like, oh, no, grant. Same thing here now. I thought I'd get a 10-minute break and take that. This couple of things. One is the fundamental question we need to ask ourselves as society at large is the migrant worker really migrant? What is this definition of migration that we are using at a conceptual level? Even the mic doesn't allow. Signals, Sheetal. The wife who stays behind, a younger sister who stays behind, a mother who stays behind, isn't she a migrant? If we understand migration as a choice that people make to improve their lives, then that entire system is migrant. Some of them are staying migrants, some of them are moving migrants, as far as I'm concerned, at a conceptual level. Why do they stay? And Sheetal already mentioned that. Many stay because they have to. So the husband is moved. There's a small piece of land that needs to be tended for 6 or 7 months in the year. The wife stays behind. Or the older brother moves, the younger brother stays behind. The son moves, the father is still able, stays behind. Or if the father is not there, the mother is able, the mother stays behind. It's also that they don't need to go because it's a family decision to diversify livelihoods. So everybody need not to do everything. So what we need to understand is when people, certain category of people choose to stay behind, it is a very, very well thought out economic decision. It's a rational human being choosing to distribute risks, distribute returns, distribute load, everything. But if you go to a district like Ganjam in Odisha, and this came up very starkly for us immediately after COVID. Who are the most vulnerable people in a village in Ganjam? So a lot of people from outside imagine the migrant households are the most vulnerable. So in fact, we had to push back with a few agencies that wanted to do social protection work and insisted that we identify migrant households and work with them, improve their social protection. We had to push back. In an average village in Ganjam, other than the government, the salaried person and the very landed person, the ones who do not migrate are the most vulnerable because they cannot, not because they do not want to. So from outside, we look at migration as a reason of, as a result of vulnerability. But the reality is actually in many places the other way. Not being able to migrate is the highest form of vulnerability in many of these villages. So people who stay behind because there is no other way. What are the reasons? There is no other able-bodied person in the household. Somebody requires constant care. So there's a parent or a family member who is terminally ill or needs palliative care, which means somebody cannot go, or somebody doesn't have the capital to go, even doesn't have the social capital to be able to borrow 500 rupees to buy a ticket from Berambur to Alua. No, that's a second part. And finally, because this I think is relevant, 93% is what we estimated to be men migrating, 7% is women. A lot of that women's migration is driven by these skill building schemes. The Prime Minister Kaushalya Vikas Yojana, which created huge training in apparel. So a lot of young people, young women, trained in 90 days of apparel, going to work in the garment industry in southern Western Tamil Nadu or Kochi or even Hyderabad and those places. The other part of women migration is in the fish processing. The industry demands nimble fingers, to peel the shrimp. What we've seen, and this is something that's extremely disturbing, and we saw that with the so-called climate migration hotspot in Kendrapada. Those of you are familiar with the narrative, there's a place called Satavaya where the sea erosion, sea ingression has led to people moving back in Kendrapad. And imagine this in a conservative, patriarchal society like Odisha, a father allowing his unmarried daughter to go and work elsewhere. A traditional middle caste peasant household where traditions are the strongest, they're probably the most happy. Allowing a 18-year-old girl to go somewhere else and work. That to me is the highest manifestation of desperation. Why would I want my unmarried daughter, to go? So from Kendrapada in a place like Kitex factory in Kochi, large number of young women. In 2020, Benoy and I had to go there because 300 of them revolted. They wanted to go back home. When we went in deep, we realized that it was triggered by 8 or 10 slightly older girls, women, who had left, so single mothers who had left their children with their parents to care. And with the lockdown and all, the parents said, we have no way to income, you come back and take care of a child. So these mothers wanted to go back to their children. So they got together 300 women from Odisha. They went on a strike and all that. And finally, Sonu Sood arranged a aircraft for 180 of them to go back to Bhubaneswar. Now, look at that story. We see women organizing, we see women, but the single mother story. The fact that many of them were in Kochi, in a factory, or finally in a hill. 2018 October, there was a cyclone, landslides. For the first time, Adivasi communities in that area realized what it means to lose trees to a hazard, like a cloudburst and a landslide. Up from the hills, we now find every village has a labor contractor who's now paying in advance for young girls to migrate to Vishakhapatnam area to work in seafood industry. Are they stayers? Are they migrants? In a household in Daringbadi, which gets 20,000, the house that you showed, gets 18 to 20,000 rupees as remittance income every month, is the woman who stays behind a stayer or a migrant? So we need to start looking at this definition of who is staying, who is migrating, not by merely their physical location, but also how they act within the migration value chain.
Uh, I think, yeah, you said rightly about, and you ended the migration value chain, and that is where I think I want to turn to Benoy and say that the other end of the value chain, how does it fare? Like whether it is, we say aspirational migration. Do those aspirations are met? Are there vulnerabilities, which could be anything, any vulnerability, climate plus social, economic, infrastructure, any other related vulnerabilities that we see in destinations? And how do you tell these stories of migrants at the destinations?
I think before coming to destinations, probably I would like to reflect on migration itself. I mean, from the source. There are three stories from Kerala. One is, of course, Neil Armstrong landing in the moon, finding a tea shop by a Keralite, Keshavan Nair. So that's the story of Kerala. So wherever there is, I mean, even they say, if cockroach can survive, there will be a Malayali. And in Antarctica, literally, during Onam, we have floral. I mean, there is no scope for floral, decoration. So they chisel the ice to make this floral decorations. So that's a sort of migration we have from a state like Kerala. And we are still a money order economy. Well, then I recently with Barsha, I went to Mustang, Nepal, remote mountain area in Nepal, and where the original inhabitants in those remote areas, very remote areas, we had to take a flight from Kathmandu to Paro and then 5 hours drive by road. I mean, we experienced the mountains. But the original inhabitants of those remote areas are no more there. So they had their apple orchards and agriculture, and then they were able to make good money. And then with that money, what they did was they sent their children to Paro and Kathmandu, and also to India for studies. So now most of them are in New York, Australia, or other places. So this, why I wanted to tell you this is, migration has been a way all of us have, benefited. I mean, recently, Dr. Murli, who used to head the operations of the United Nations Environment Program, he's from Kerala. So he, when National Geographic provided an opportunity to look at your where are you from through your genes, so he found out that both his parents had origins in somewhere in Africa. So essentially everybody, I mean, I'm sure all of us sitting here have immensely benefited from migration. And then we hear government of India and a lot of states saying that we want to curb or stop migration. In Kerala, now even Kerala wants to stop migration or reduce migration because there isn't anybody to, So it is mostly the senior citizens and the migrants who come from other states. So migration has been a way every society has evolved. We primarily need to recognize migration as a solution. So look at caste. So a lot of people who come to Kerala, what they see is we we certainly are looked upon or treated as second-class citizens, but only as migrants, not as Muslims, not as Adivasis, not as Dalits. So from the source areas, from places where they come, I mean, particularly we did a study from, I mean, where are people going from Ganjam? Ganjam is historically known for migration. So we realized that the advantageous castes are going to places like Surat, and the disadvantageous populations are coming to, such as the tribes, the Christians, the SC community. They are coming to southern Indian states. Why? Because the level of discrimination, caste discrimination in Ganjam was being reproduced even in Surat by the dominant caste. Whereas in the case of people who come to Kerala, I mean, they were able to sit in the same mess and eat. There was no need to keep the the utensils separate, etc. So what I wanted to underline was migration is the quickest way of intergenerational social mobility for a person in rural India. And migration is not just movement over space, it is traveling on a time machine. So I mean, if you look at the regional development globally, places are, I mean, at different time zones actually. So if a person moves from a state like Odisha to Kerala, so in terms of development, you are, I mean, the sort of development you have in Kerala, it will take several years and perhaps a few decades in some parts of Odisha. So, and the youngsters from Kerala are moving to places like Europe and North America, where they think that's a place where they would be able to excel. So migration has a lot of, migration provides literally a world of opportunities. And let us take the case of climate related issues. Orissa is known for disasters. People are so used to disasters. So a quick recovery from a disaster requires quick money. Quick money in rural areas come only through two ways: the sahukar, the money lender, or migration. Even if you take money from the money lender to repay, you have to migrate. So migration gives you, I mean, helps you to adapt to a lot of climate related challenges. May it be a flood in Assam, or landslides in the mountainous areas of Nepal, or cyclones in Gajapati. So if you really want to recover quickly, you will need to quickly get some money. And imagine the case of a rural Indian who is primarily depending on rain-fed agriculture. So how do you get some cash? You will have to wait at least 3-4 months to get some cash. That is also uncertain now, because if the rains are come on time, you have probably a good harvest. But if at the time of the harvest, if there is rain, everything is gone for a toss. So practically speaking, so everybody who has at least some common sense wouldn't certainly depend just on agriculture. I think paddy cultivation, it takes 3 to 4 months, Libby. So you wait for 3-4 months after you're sowing the seed for a crop, and then you have to get that harvest and then sell it and then to get money. So you're waiting for cash for a long, 3-4 months at least. And you can't predict whether you will have a good harvest. And last year, the harvest was very bad in many places. So So these are places from where people try to come to other places. So yesterday, half day, we were sitting and submitting a petition to the government of Kerala to provide compensation to a family from Nepal who lost their child in the landslide in Wayanad. So imagine people move from areas which are impacted by climate change to destinations primarily to cope with their climate, and these destinations are also highly vulnerable to climate related issues, where when when a disaster happens, everybody is vulnerable or everybody is impacted. When everybody is impacted, the most vulnerable are left behind. Then 2018 floods and landslides, almost I think 3/4 of Kerala was impacted. So everyone was moving out of their house. So people were more worried about themselves, their children, their voters, and the native population. So to put it in the um, words of a panchayat, the local self-government member, what he said is, I'm not even able to take care of my people in my ward. You're talking about migrants. So this is where so their inherent vulnerabilities, marginalizers. It is, if you look at those people who move to the cities, or move to, irrespective of whether it is city or rural areas. So the most people who make temporary movements are almost entirely from the marginalized populations, compared to those who make permanent moves. I think it is 10 to 15 times more. It will be a person from a BPL family, a landless person, or from a agrarian family. So the people who come are already marginalized, and in the cities they are much more vulnerable compared to the people who live in the cities. And these days it is not just the regular disadvantages, like they don't have a formal job, they don't have a proper housing. There is also rising xenophobia. Now Indian citizens are being pushed to Bangladesh. Saying that these are people from Bangladesh because they speak Bengali. This is the context in which we currently operate. So climate changes complicate, or aggravates the inherent vulnerabilities of people. In destinations, there are so many such vulnerabilities. So you come as a migrant, and why women stay behind is also because coming to a city with a family is prohibitively expensive for people. And then women take care of both home and farm. And I'm the older persons, everybody. So it is an arrangement. So it's a decision. It is also a risk diversification strategy of households. They're very pragmatic that way. So coming to the cities, they have, people are engaged in occasions that generally the native populations avoid, because the so-called 3D jobs, the dirty, demeaning, dangerous sort of jobs, which no one is willing to take up. We have seen death cases, where the migrant knew that this wall may collapse and I may die, and they flagged it to the contractor also. कि ये टूट सकता है. The response was, if you don't want to work, you go. But there is there are certain people who cannot afford to just so they take that risk on a daily basis. So this is a situation. And then when it comes to alerts, if there is a disaster, when the alerts are generally in the native language, so people miss alerts, because it's when you miss the alerts, you are less prepared. When you're less prepared, the impact, loss, and damage are much more severe compared to the others. And because you are not part of, not treated as part of the society, you don't have documents, residential proofs, etc. In the rehabilitation measures, you're never counted. And so even people who move to destinations because of climate change are highly vulnerable to climate issues at the destinations. And if such issues, disasters happen, they will, there is a substantial, it heightens their vulnerability. Not just their vulnerability, it has an impact on the households and the whole village economy at the source states also.
Thanks. I think this was really a story to see that, how source and destinations are connected. Not really very different. We don't need to treat them as binaries. I want to push a little bit and ask a question which is maybe very relevant to this crowd, and wanted to ask both of you, Libby and Benoy, is about, if we know these kind of things are existing, like, the vulnerabilities in source areas and also the risks in destinations, how do we address this as, responsibility? Like, how do we tell the stories responsibly? How can we as a communicators avoid the narrative of other uh, migrant or a refugee stereotyping kind of a thing, especially when reporting from, either end, which is rural or urban, both the sides. So, like, in urban areas also, I can imagine there are things where are said that people who are not migrating as kind of failures or not successful kind of a people. But also in urban areas, there is, when person has moved also, is because they are not able to cope or not able to make their livings in the source area. So there's both the sides, these kind of stories. And how do we make these more responsible? How do we tell these stories more responsibly than making it as others?
I think the narratives around this whole rural urban uh, social, cultural, political, economic movements, the movement, not movements, the movement, the act of moving. There are several biases that we tend to ignore. One bias is that it is somebody's responsibility. That Odisha, there is high out migration because Odisha government has failed. A very classic standard. Most of the newspaper media reports around migration end with this scheme didn't work or this. No, it's somebody else's responsibility. So the writer, the reporter, the one who quoted has no responsibility. We are only observers and we are armchair critics, not even critiques. So there is that huge bias of whose responsibility are we? Who are we holding responsible? Is the migrant worker not responsible? In this case, this wall fell and the two people died from Ganjam, who they knew it was going to happen. They had warned the contractor. Is their desperation to work sufficient insurance to absolve them of the responsibility for their act? I don't think so. I mean, you will say you are blaming the victim. It's not. Because if we don't start narrating that individuals have agency at any situation, everybody can push back. Many people push back only when the back is completely to the wall. But as a society, the education that we need to do is that. And that's what popular media has to do. That's what NGOs have to do. That was academics have to do. Is a victim always justified? Is the responsibility always with the other side? So this bias of responsibility is something that we need to, and I'm finding it on a daily basis becoming more and more difficult. The other is this, on the one hand is sympathy, the other hand is lack of sympathy. So, oh, it's so bad. Like this Ganjam case, migrants are the most vulnerable. Where is the reality? And what are the shades of reality that we need to understand? Is a label migrant sufficient to use the label vulnerable? On the other side also, I'm just using this from what's most convenient for me to argue. So this perspective bias is something that causes. And my pet peeve is these academicians, researchers, which many of you swallow hook, line, and sinker. Yes, Odisha is a losing state. In the migration narrative, Kerala is a gaining state within India. Kerala is a losing state in the context of international migration. Odisha is a losing state everywhere. UP is a losing state. Bihar is a losing state. I am getting 200 crores every month in each of my blocks. Am I losing? So what is this jid? What is this sense of pride or the absence of that makes you call Odisha a loser state? Kerala is losing 200, 250 crores every day to migrant workers who are emitting it to Odisha, Assam and Bengal. Why isn't Kerala called a loser state? Why is it Kerala called is only labor coming winning? So payment for labor is not winning. I mean, it's not losing. So there are these issues that as a society, I don't say media alone, reporters alone, but as a society we need to examine.
Yeah, I think the basic understanding all of us should have is, in India, migration is a fundamental right. So you have, as a citizen of India, you have the right to travel, live and work in any part of the country. It's your fundamental right. Nobody can ask you for where is your Aadhaar card. So that many people don't realize that. So Kerala, which is quite advanced in terms of migration, call migrants as guest workers, which is a highly discriminatory term in the international. So they're saying that we are treating them as atithis. Atithi Devo Bhava is our. So, but if you're treating us Atithi Devo Bhava, you should express it. You should practice it, which is not the case. So essentially everywhere, the whole world, migrants are treated this way. I mean, these are criminals. These are people who bring diseases. They take away all our money. Yeah. So this is true for people from Poland who come to the UK, Mexicans in the United States, people from India, Bangladesh, Nepal in the Middle East, and in Bangalore, Bangladeshis, the people from Bengal are treated, and even in Kerala. So this is universal. And what we should realize is these are perceptions. These are popular perceptions without any empirical, evidence. In Kerala, migrant workers spend in a year 200 billion. And most of this money go to the informal, vendors, because we all now travel in Uber, Ola, we buy stuff from Flipkart, Amazon. So it is the migrant workers who buy stuff from the wayside vendors, the grocery shops, etc. And then in the buses, so most in the morning and evening, it is migrant workers and school children who generally travel in the buses. So migrants, I mean, I think one estimate says that 10% of the GDP, that I think it's a modest estimate by Priya, is contributed by the migrant workers. So essentially everybody has the right to be, and increasingly migration is at the center of the global politics. That's why Mr. Trump has got a second term. Brexit happened only because of this. Nationalization in the Middle East. primarily because of xenophobia. The what is it called? The special drive for voters SIR. It is because of this, and there is a substantial level of xenophobia all over the world. I mean, Europe is more and more hostile towards migrants, and Mediterranean is closely monitored. So people who come in, refugees who come in, not so seaworthy vessels are pushed back. No, it is not just India doing so. People are sent to Rwanda and many other countries. Pakistan is deporting people from Afghanistan. So even day before yesterday it happened. So there is a very high level of xenophobia in the world, and then as I mentioned, there are a lot of perceptions that people are. I mean, these migrants are a nuisance. They're a waste. I mean, they pollute the city, and these perceptions shape the attitude and behavior of the receiving communities. People believe that this is true, and media has a key role in it. The way media portrays migration, migrants, makes a lot of difference. So we were pissed off with Akila. Akila was troubling us so much that so the children were the small children were not going to Anganwadis. So Akila wanted to report this, and then we work on migrations. So every day, I mean, morning, evening, Akila came to us. Akila became a nuisance. I mean, we felt like that. So Vaishali was so pissed off that she's asking people. I mean, it's their cooking time. But when the report, her report came out, it was exceptionally well captured, and she got an award. Hats off to her work. And primarily because of that, the social justice department started considering having daycare centers for migrant children of migrant workers. So, and then in we had an issue. I mean, Kitex it's a garment company. So Kitex, there was on Christmas Eve there was some altercations among the workers, and it became a big issue. And then because it became a big issue, so a lot of people were arrested, and the company was not taking ownership of getting these poor. I mean, people who were sleeping were also taken because a police jeep was, put on fire by some people. So nobody was willing to take people on bail. So we reached out to the Hindu. A half a page article they wrote. The moment that came out, the company acted. So everybody was taken on bail. So media, and then recently, children, see, according to the Right to Education Act, you don't require any document to put a child between the age of 6 to 14 in school. But schools have their own softwares, which requires Aadhaar, blah, blah, blah. So if these are not there, children are not taken in schools. So even in Kerala, they say, "Ho gaya, hamara admission ka time ho gaya." You can never say so to a family. So, and we were treated like, like a nuisance, even by the government schools. ये लोग कहाँ से आते हैं ये बच्चों को पकड़ के? So after a few days, these people, I mean, सुबह नहाते नहीं है. So this is sort of they call migrant children Bhai Kuti. So Bhai is not the literal brother. Bhai means migrant from North India. And Bhai's wife is not Behan, Bhaichi, which is a very derogatory term used in Kerala. So this is the way, I mean, even a child is called Bhai Kuti by the teachers. So coming back to this, children were not being enrolled. So we were desperate. We wanted to get the children. We reached out to some of our media colleagues who realized the issue, and they flagged it flagged it. The moment the news came in, the system started functioning. The legal service authority ordered that any school, anybody doesn't admit the child, you will be, you will have to face action. And similarly, there was a lady from West Bengal, Darjeeling district, who was in this Maldives. She was her husband was dying, and they were not sending. The employer was not willing to send the child back. Sorry, the lady back. And we tried all our ways. So we wrote to the embassy. We wrote to the government of Maldives. We influenced civil society organizations. Nothing worked. So the moment, then we tried. We reached out to a colleague in other part of the country and requested them, can we flag this to the media? So the moment in a local newspaper, an article came. It just came in Siliguri and around. The moment a replacement was given to the employer. So that's the power of the media. And then when media has power, media also has, like what in the case of Superman, with more power comes more responsibilities. So this climate sensitivities, or being sensitive to the struggles of a migrant, or why it is important for certain people to migrate, and why is it important that we integrate them, we assimilate them, we mainstream them. Media plays a very, very crucial role. So I think that way, each one of you, the way you write, the words you use make a lot of difference. As I said, the perceptions, the general perceptions of people of the receiving society, shapes their behavior. And most of the receiving societies where there is a significant number of migrants treat migrants, they are with stigma and discrimination. And media plays a very important role in, and this is my last sentence. In every society, every destination, I would say, most of the challenges or struggles or problems faced by the migrant workers, their families, are cannot be addressed by working with the migrants. It can only be addressed working with the receiving societies, because it is the receiving people from the receiving societies who exploit, who discriminate, and who treat migrants as second-class citizens. Thank you.
Thanks, Benoy and Libby. Very enlightening kind of a discussion. And I think it has given us a real good thought of, what is the value of looking at migration corridor and not look at just, rural as source, and what are the problems there, and urban as another destination, and, the problems there. So, and also touching upon what you guys, both the organization have done from corridor thinking to action. Like, we also get to know a lot of things on a day-to-day basis as how you coordinate between these two governments, to societies, to communities, and also individuals. So thanks for that discussion. I don't want to take time from the people to ask you questions. So maybe I'll open up the floor for people to ask. And
there's a big grouping out here.
Yeah. I saw first Kavita, then...
Should I go? I'll go first, right? So my question is that as a storyteller, I feel conflicted when I meet people who, for example, in a place like Ganjam, where there are multiple generations, almost 4 generations or 5 generations in one family that I met, who are traveling to Surat to work as Paulum workers. that there is a certain amount of gentrification in their villages. There is definitely a certain amount of socioeconomic growth, education also, but young people who are 18, 16, 17, 18, who've finished a little bit of school, some people who finished 12th standard, maybe a couple of years of undergrad course, are still finding no other option to make a living but to go back to doing what their ancestors, what their previous generations have been doing. I feel conflicted as a storyteller to analyze whether whether this kind of socioeconomic growth is indeed a thing to be looked at kindly when they're unable to ultimately break free from the larger questions of poverty and desperation. That even those who great grandfathers were in powerlooms in Surat feel that they have no other option but to go back and continue to do the hard labor, long hours, and the distance from home. Also, that they were so vulnerable, despite having spent 4 generations in Surat, they were so vulnerable during the pandemic that they were not only forced to come back, but also that they had cases against them when there was a riot in Gujarat. Some of them faced criminal cases, and I know that organizations had to work really hard to get some of them out from police stations during that period. So how should we, or how would you suggest that we view these things where there doesn't seem to be any movement towards actually breaking free eventually?
So, all of you actually spoke about the historic migration. One of my experiences from Maharashtra is that, of course, there has been migration, for example, from Marathwada to cities like Pune for a very long time now. But with climate-induced challenges increasing, every alternate year almost being a drought year, the number of people migrating and the demography is also seeing a shift. Like you mentioned about women and older folks staying back, it was a similar pattern, but now we are also seeing way older people having to migrate because the family also needs multiple hands to work, and also agriculture is not at all viable in the source village. Are you seeing any similar trend? And when they migrate, are you seeing a change in the negotiating power as far as, for example, working conditions and wages are concerned, especially when there are disasters or extreme weather events one after the other? And when more people come, Libby mentioned that one needs to also acknowledge the agency. So does that lead to collective agency, or like, if you could speak a little bit about whether they're able to organize themselves and demand better working conditions and things like that?
So, the question that Kavita raised, I think it's a question of choice. We don't have a problem with the great grandson continuing in politics, household industry. We have a problem with the great grandson continuing in agriculture, forgetting that these are choices people make, whatever be the limitations of the spectrum of choice they have. That's one. It is, I mean, for me, I will not claim, I mean, I agree completely when Benoy said migration is probably the fastest route to intergenerational social economic mobility. It is still the fastest. Do people choose to do? So in Odisha, particularly in Ganjam, if you look at scheduled caste households, second generation is in school. Scheduled tribes, second generation, including, I mean, more girls than boys, is in school. Not so among the OBCs. So there is also a cultural, social construct around identity and what we should do. And this you will see across India. I mean, I'm not trying to be casteist in that way, but as an observer, I cannot help, be it in Haryana, be it in Bihar, be it in Odisha, be it in Kerala. Forget Tamil Nadu, you can't even mention. It's the middle castes which tend to become socially, culturally more inward with passing time. Fewer girls in school, much. In Ganjam, the bigger problem is much higher early marriage, to the extent of Aadhaar 18-year-old marriages. So there is a societal issue there. But within that, there are also exceptional households. So when you say you are conflicted, I think we also need to locate it within the reality of that that society and that household. For every OBC household that you will show me has not moved, I can show you 3 ST households that have moved. So I'm just making that as an illustration. On the question of changing dynamics of migration, I was mentioning, no? Why would young girls, unmarried young girls, be allowed to migrate? It is probably the only one that I will openly and honestly accept as climate-induced migration. That's the only one. Everything else I think it's climate augmented. But young women from Kendrapada and young women from Tumba migrating is climate-induced. It's seriously a result effect of climate events, weather events in the last 10, 15 years. So it's across. On the Western Odisha, Western Odisha is a migration that need to stop, because Western Odisha migration is not economic. Western Odisha migration is structural. It's the landless. The scheduled castes are the landless. They are the ones who've been migrating for the last 60 years because, one, semi-arid, productivity is very low. The agrarian economy cannot sustain market wage labor. So the only way for communities to earn cash, households to earn cash, is to migrate. Now, nothing that, sorry, I'm holding a mic. I'm very, very apprehensive about the current actions around addressing migration. Giving a goat is not going to stop migration. Giving the woman a money to open a grocery shop is not going to stop migration, because no non-Dalit is going to buy from that shop, which is a lived reality of that area. It is that place. So we cannot remove the place out of the equation and say change has not happened or change has happened.
Very quick response.
I'll respond to both. I think it's a person's choice whether or not to migrate. So we have no role in that. People ask, can we not allow the migrants in Bangalore to be voters here? We are not the people to decide. It is they who need to decide on whether they need to stay or whether they need to move. And households make practical decisions. Ganjam receives in a month 124 crore as remittances. Just one banking facilitator, a day's transaction is around 6 to 8 lakhs. So that's the role of migration in Ganjam. So everybody understands the potential of migration, and everybody also understands the potential of staying back also. So what are the opportunities staying back? We just finished a study, just synthesizing the result. Who are the people who are staying back without migration? Politicians, leaders, people who have government employment or salaried regular jobs, people who are skilled drivers, electricians, etc. And then people who have irrigated land. All this taken together is a minuscule proportion. Imagine a person who has studied, graduate or postgraduate, having reservation, say ST. It's not that easy to get a job. So you need to, there is corruption. You'll have to pay money even to get a job. So what is more pragmatic is, given the structural constraint, the quickest way of making money is moving to a place where the wages are much higher than what you have. So that's the way people, it is 5 generations, probably social capital, that make them migrate. Not necessarily that. So at the same time, they may have, if they're interested, but most people are not interested in buying land now because agriculture is not viable. So, so if a person from Ganjam migrates, probably that is that is their primary choice, because I mean, people who move to Ganjam are probably in the skill levels are much better, so they get an average some 30,000 per month or even more than that, and then you have your people around. So you have, I mean, in what we've seen is wherever people move, large movements, you have people to travel with. You have a lot of information to take this migration decision. Do I move or do not move? So this migration decision making is much easy. You have people to travel with. You know very well where you're going, how you're going. I mean, what is the wage? What's the sort of. So people move, obviously. Yeah. So moving is not only helping people who move, people who are staying back also benefit. So if there are 100 people, 20 people move, the labor force, I mean, the per capita availability of labor locally will be much better. And people who invest in anything, even if a person buys an auto, another person gets employment as an auto driver. So overall, a lot of improvement, and cash gets circulated. This cash is a very important thing. Hard money, liquid cash. And NREGS doesn't give you liquid cash. If you work, you will get money some months later. So migration, coming back to that, migration, people who have migrated very well understands the potential of migration. So they, I mean, they definitely will consider migration as a choice. What was the other one?
Okay, we'll take the next question maybe then. The collectivization, that is what you already
Yeah,
said.
collectivization, please, can I, I'll take 1 minute to just answer it. It depends. See, migrants is not a homogeneous category. It's a very diverse group. So there are domestic helps who don't even know where exactly they are. I mean, if you ask them also, where are you working? They do not know. So we recently rescued a girl from Gajapati. So she did not know where she is. So we had to ask her to take a picture out of the window and then find out which place it is. But there are people there are places where there is a large network of people. For example, there is an Odia Samaj in Surat. And then in Kerala also, there is a Bengali group who organize pujo. So there are, I mean, in areas, but there is an elite version and another version. So you will see different versions of that. But everybody, every state or every group may not have that agency. For example, the Bengalis are more vocal about their rights, whereas a person from coming from Jharkhand, from a PVTG, may not be able to do that. Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe the last question and the other two which are raising hands, I'll request you to take it to the T spot and have the question and discussion with you.
So, can you hear me?
Yeah.
So thank you very much. I mean, Sheetal, Libby and Benoy, it's been really wonderful to listen to all of you. I have two questions. One is a very basic question, that what is the media that migrants consume? And how do they consume their news or their information? So can you just share some of that information with us? And you have said, I mean, we've spoken, I really appreciate the point about family of migrants and not just, seeing it as a single individual. So what, in your opinion, is the actual cost of migration, the socio-economic, emotional, political cost of migration? And when we talk about migration also, although you are saying many women don't migrate, we know that many women do migrate, many families do migrate, especially with very small children. So can you also tell us that what is their experience of migration? Because while the remittances and all are fantastic and so on, I myself have reported on the kind of violence and gender inequality in among women migrants who don't speak the language, don't know where the police station is, don't have any social support. Children, babies, for example, are lying there in a construction site. So can you also just talk a little bit about that? So I have two questions.
Well, I think the third question we can also take it off, if with your permission, Preeti.
Yeah, sure.
The first two questions, maybe because that has.
Don't worry, I'm a journalist. I'm used to badgering with questions, so I'll badger again.
First two questions, I would also like to know about what media the migrants are consuming and the cost of migration, including the emotional cost living.
So we reach out to workers mostly through WhatsApp. Facebook is falling out of favor for various reasons. YouTube videos, if the link comes, they will use. So so anything transacted through WhatsApp is today, I guess, the most effective way. It doesn't matter what is transacted, as long, it's the medium that is there. For instance, Odisha TV, OTV, the TV channel, invested heavily into OTT. And they had two target groups: newly married women with a device and migrant workers. So the entire Odisha soap industry is in Tarang OTT. Huge traction. So I was in this place called Nettur in Kochi. Every third person when I went there was watching Tarang. Tarang OTT. Tarang is the brand. So that is, most of them haven't been to school or haven't been to school sufficient enough to read. So a lot of video. Video is what? The cost of migration is... So in 2019, when Vikas decided we needed to understand migration better, Benoy had come in one remote part of Kalahandi. We did a one-day workshop with a bunch of community leaders, men, migrant workers themselves, and women. So when Benoy sat with the women's group, he realized that they had to be split between younger wives and mothers. The moment that group got split, insights of a very different nature, which younger women didn't want to speak in the presence of older women. So whose cost? I guess that's a good example of good illustration to say who's bearing the cost. So what were the young, and these are parts of Odisha which still have very limited mobile connectivity. So their biggest issue was, I'm not able to, their biggest worry was, is a husband in a relationship at the destination. That was, in simple terms, their biggest worry. Because they come only once in a year. So, and what was the mother's issue? The slightly older mothers. One is, children do not obey what the mothers say. The male voice is needed. So children are becoming more disobedient and unruly and all that. Who brings me fuel wood when I need it? Who buys medicine for me? When I need medicine, who is there to go? Community leaders were worried about the cultural influences, behavioral influences young migrants were bringing in. So to me, these are the costs of migration from the way people see it. And for migrant workers, it's sufficiently, the whole thing we spoke about is the cost. Fast food, chow mein culture. In Tuamul Rambur block in Kalahandi, the moment first lockdown was lifted and the bunch of people came back, at that time we had quite a few Malayali young colleagues in the field. They all became very happy. Why? Porota chicken fry. Every small junction on that highway, on that road, had a migrant worker who set up a temporary stall with the Kerala Visu porota and chicken fry. So those are, but community leaders were also worried about this whole movement away from farming. And that to me was, I think, the biggest behavioral influence on migration, that they were worried about what will happen to the land, what will happen to the traditional ways of food security. Because most of them still don't believe they can buy every food item from the market.
Thank you so much. I think
No, I think Libby did not respond to the women. I think both ways. I mean, women who are able to go with their husbands have more time with their husbands. I mean, away from the in-law. I mean, the influence of in-law is not there. So that way, they're more. I mean, in the decision making, in everything, there is more involvement, and then they also have an opportunity to earn. So earning means, I mean, overall, women's earning has a significant impact on the household expenditure. So, so this is one. At the same time, now I've seen young girls. I mean, it's like liberating for them. Some of them. So, in many cases, in tribal societies, why even when the parents do not agree, they have the freedom to go and work elsewhere. So, I've seen people, and I've seen when I land in Ranchi, I've seen girls who come from garment factories, I mean, with proudly moving with their trolleys to out of the. So there is a lot of opportunities for women to who move, and when women stay back also, uh, their uh, their involvement in household decision making is much more. Sometimes, say for example, husband sends money and they are building a house, it is the entire responsibility of the lady to take care of. So that way, there are. I mean, there are a lot of women whose involvement in decision making and action has improved, and but at the same time, there are people who are more vulnerable. The men are away, so there is no other. So there are vulnerabilities. So I'll keep on talking. So we can have.
yeah, there are enough and more examples with both of them, and I think you should catch them both throughout the day.
But Sheetal, if you allow me, I
Hey.
wanted to share just one experience. I was young when I was studying at the International Institute for Population Sciences. I was doing my PhD. So our teacher used to take us for evaluations of the Maharashtra State AIDS Control Society. So I visited Ichal Karanji in Kolhapur, which is. So I went to a brothel where I met a 17-year-old girl. So I mean, I come from the HIV background, so intervention. I was talking to her, and she said, so we were basically looking at AIDS prevention. I mean, how robust is the AIDS? She told me that when some 13, 14 people uses her, and because there is no emotional involvement, the vagina is dry. So there is friction and there is aberrations, and it's very painful. Unfortunately, she has to take a paracetamol and then continue, invite other person. And the reason why she is there was the past year there was a drought in Karnataka, and the choice was either the whole family commit suicide or this girl is sent to this place for 2 years for some thousands. So this is, I think, 20 years back. The impact of climate. Now you can imagine how complex it would be. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we have to give a big round of applause to both of them.